Hello and welcome to Traditional Painting the Digital Way. This is where I use digital painting apps to teach traditional painting techniques. In this video series, we're going to be discussing how to add depth to a painting that looks too detailed or too busy. And we want to go ahead and I'll show you some examples here of a painting that's so busy and has too many details in it, or a photograph, that it flattens the image out and it doesn't make for a good composition. Here we have a forest painting, and it does have a road in it, but it's pretty busy looking. And so here's another one that has less trees in it and a bit more atmospheric perspective, and it looks a lot more depthful and three-dimensional. In the other painting, there was just so many leaves and trees there that you couldn't see any distance. And so you kind of want to try to add a little bit of some depth by cutting out all the busyness in the picture. You want to cut down on your objects. Sometimes less is better in painting. I know that you want to do detailed paintings, but sometimes it's better if you cut all those busy objects out and just kind of go with a few select objects and try to add some depth. So that was the painting that we're going to be doing. And here's some brushes that I use if you're following along traditionally. And this is the canvas that I use. I use canvas board, and you can use these colors. These are Grumbacher Academy colors. You can also use Liquitex colors, and that's all if you want to follow along traditionally. Now, the app that we're going to be using is Infinite Painter for Android, and I'm going to go ahead and start with some of the brushes in the paint category. And I usually like to try the Filbert or Old Oil to just trying to do a background. And so here I want to go ahead and do a background. And we want to make it a distant looking background. So I want some purple and some kind of off-white yellow to add to the background. And this is going to be the background trees, but you're not going to have a lot of detail in them, and that's going to give you some depth to your painting, and it won't be so busy and so over detailed that it just looks flat and you can't tell any depth in it. And I'm adding dioxazine purple with a touch of Hooker's green and some white acrylic gesso if you're following along with traditional materials. And you just kind of want to make some patches of green and purple and a little bit of cadmium yellow light in the corner where the light is going to be shining through the trees. And this picture is just a lot better for showing depth than the first picture that I showed you, because it doesn't have so much detail in the leaves and the trees, so much that you can't even see the end of the path. And you want to make the end of the path in here to go ahead and add three-dimensional depth. And so here I'm just working a little bit more on the background colors, and this is called atmospheric perspective. When you make the colors lighter and more faded out, it looks like it's trees in the distance and mountains or something way off in the distance there. And also that patch of yellow is going to be representative of the light shining through the trees. So you want to go ahead and just kind of smooth that out, and then I want to use the perspective tool in Infinite Painter just to kind of give it use the road to make 1 point perspective here. And this is what we're using for the road, is just 1 point perspective. So it's going to be real wide on this end, and then as it hits the visual viewpoint endpoint on the line there, it's going to narrow into one dot. And so that gives you the three-dimensional look and 1 point perspective. And then I want to go ahead and add some dirt color to the side of the 1 point perspective road, and just kind of use burnt umber for that, probably, and add a little bit of a light brown to make the road, add a little bit of a lighter color for the ruts in the road. You just kind of want to give some indication of dirt and leaves and things like that, because this is not a paved road. This is just an old dirt road there going through the forest. And it won't be perfectly straight or anything because it's not a highway, it's not paved. And then here I want to go ahead and add some more light purple in the back to represent the distant trees that are going to be on the far end of the tunnel, kind of, that we've got here, this tree tunnel or path. And so I'm adding just a little bit more of some uneven round type circles, not circles, but kind of uneven shapes, to sort of represent the foliage of the distant trees. And don't kill all your lights. You don't want to kill all your light yellow, and you don't want to kill the light green. And here I'm adding a little bit more of the light green, and you can use hooker's green with some white acrylic gesso and add some phthalo yellow green to it to just give it kind of a distant leafy look. And we don't want any big details right now. We want everything to be pretty indistinct. And here I'm using the Pollock brush and any kind of brush in Infinite Painter that will give me this fluffy, jagged look. And you can use your bristle brush if you're following along traditionally and just tap with the bristles of the end of your brush. A number 8 or a number 6 will work pretty good for that. And so here I'm adding the different shades of green. I'm adding a little bit darker green for it. And I'm also adding a little bit of the phthalo yellow green color, probably with a touch of cadmium yellow light if you're following along traditionally, just to give it the look of the leaves being hit by the sunlight. And the sunlight is coming from the top right in this painting. So you want to go ahead and put some of those on the right side of the road. And then I want to go ahead and add some distant trees. And I'm kind of using the straight line tool, but you don't want them to be standing up completely straight, because in nature they're kind of leaning to the right or to the left, and so you want to kind of just make them lean a little bit. And the lines don't have to be completely straight either. They can be sort of jagged and a little bit crooked and things like that. And I'm using sort of a light purplish gray color because they're still distant and you don't want them to be real intense yet until you come into the foreground. And this just gives it kind of a mist looking color. And then here I'm using kind of a burnt umber color for the closer trees. And again, you want those also to not be completely smooth. You want them to be a little bit jagged, a little bit crooked. And so I'm adding these are kind of the trees that are going to be in the middle ground. And I added some splotches of a light purple on the ground, because that's going to be patches of light passing through the trees and hitting on the ground. So you want to kind of just add that a little bit and work on it later and make it a little more detailed. So here I'm just kind of trying to find a lighter color to add a little bit of the leaves and the foliage that are going to be being hit by the light and the sunbeams there. And so if you're following along traditionally, you would use phthalo yellow green, some cadmium yellow light, throw in a little bit of Hooker's green, use a lot of white acrylic gesso to lighten it up. And I'm just kind of adding it into where you can see the leaves are being lit up by the sunlight, the edges of the leaves there. And so I'm just putting them in on the left side of the picture, and then the corner of the picture is going to be darker, and the leaves are going to be darker there, and you have to have the darker leaves to show the contrast of the ones that are being hit by the light. So this is the end of part 1 of our Forest Path series. And in part 2, we're going to work more on the trees and some of the light effects. So if you want to see that, hit the subscribe button. And thanks everybody for watching. Thank you so much for your support. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments down below, and I'll catch you later.